Hey guys, welcome to the Photoshop training channel. I have another very exciting video for you today. My name is Jesus Ramirez. You can find me at Twitter at JR from PTC. In this video, we'll be talking about Photoshop CC, that's Photoshop 14. I'll be showing you the most exciting features of this new version of Photoshop. Now, there's been a lot of controversy about Photoshop CC, especially because the application is only available as a monthly subscription. But I'm not really going to get into that too much. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm just here to show you the new features and how they work and how you can take advantage of them if you have access to Photoshop CC. Anyway guys, let's get started with the video. One of the most talked about features of Photoshop CC is the shake reduction filter. It's a filter that analyzes the trajectory of a camera shake and helps it restore sharpness to otherwise unusable images. So I have an image here that you can see has some shake blur that was captured while I took this image, and this is an image of a waterfall in Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park in Big Sur, California. And it would be a better image if the camera hadn't shook when the picture was taken. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this new filter to try to salvage this image. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a smart object out of this layer here. Now keep in mind, you don't have to use a smart object to use this filter, but I prefer to do so, so I work non-destructively, and I recommend you do the same. After you convert the image into a smart object, go into Filter, Sharpen, Shake Reduction. Okay, and in this new window, you'll see the Shake Reduction options panel, and make sure that you turn on Advanced, just so you can see the same thing I'm seeing. If you don't see this square here, is because you have the Advanced option disabled, so turn that on. The first option in the blur trace settings is the blur trace bounds, which specifies the size of the blur trace boundaries. Works very well at 30 pixels. You can play around with it and change it if you want to. It might make a difference in your image, but I found with the images that I've worked on, 30 pixels works okay. And for source noise, auto seems to work pretty well for me, at least with the images I've tried so far. Smoothing, if you bring it all the way to the left, the images will get much sharper, and I'll zoom in so you can see. The images get sharper, but it creates more noise. If I move smoothing all the way to the right, the images get much smoother, but you lose a lot of detail. So you have to find a balance between the smoothing. So, you know, somewhere about 30% or so seems to work fine, at least for this image. And same thing goes for artifact suppression. You have to find the right balance between the image and see how the artifacts are going to get suppressed in the image. So for example, if I bring it here, there's some artifacts you can see here. If I want to get rid of those, I might go too far, but then the image becomes blurry again. So again, you have to find the balance for that. I moved these around a bit. I'm just going to hold Alt on my keyboard to change the cancel button into a reset button. That's Alt on the PC, Option on the Mac. I'm going to click on Reset just to reset my settings to default settings. The default settings were actually pretty good for my particular image. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. Now, this estimation region box here, you can click and drag it around, place it in the point of interest of your image. So in this case, I would like the waterfall to be the point of interest, and you can make this bigger if you want to. That way, the thing that's most important in the image to you is where the data is being gathered to fix the blur. So I'm choosing the waterfall. If this were a picture where you had maybe people, maybe you had a face here and another face here, you can create a new region just simply by clicking and dragging on another side of the image, and you can see how now we have two estimation regions, and you can create more if you want to. So maybe I want to have these trees up here and be another point of interest. So I can have these two, and what that does is it just helps Photoshop know what are the important areas of the image to try to get the best results in those specific areas. Also, these are the masks that show the blur trace. Essentially, that's how my hand was moving when I took the image. So if I click on the expand blur trace icon here, you can see that this is the motion that my hand was doing as the image was taken, and actually is the same here. For this particular image, I really don't need two of these. I'm just going to delete one. I just wanted to show you that feature in case it was useful for your image. The only thing left to do in this image is maybe zoom in a bit so we could see some better details, and maybe work on the smoothing a bit, maybe bring it down a bit to get a little bit more of a sharper image. Press P on your keyboard to turn off the preview, and you can see the before and after. So that's before, and this is after. I'll zoom in a bit more so you can get a better sense of what it's actually doing in this area here. So again, pressing P is the same thing as clicking on this checkbox here. So I'm going to press P, so that's after, and this is before. So as you can see, the image is very blurry, and you can kind of see the motion that my hand had when the image was taken. If I press P once again, you'll see that everything sort of gets snapped back into place, and the image looks much, much sharper. So this tool is pretty amazing. You can really salvage some images that otherwise would be unusable. When you're done, press OK, and the changes will obviously be applied to your image. And since we applied a smart filter, we can always come back, double click on the word shake reduction to bring the options again and make changes if need be. I'm going to press cancel on that. You can also double click on this icon here, which will allow you to change the opacity and blending mode of the filter. So maybe you just want to apply the same effect to it, but maybe reduce the opacity so that the filter is not so sharp. You can do that if you want to. You can also apply the filter as a blending mode if you'd like. One other thing I want to show you is with the shake reduction tool, you can set the blur direction manually by using this tool. So you can just click and drag on this tool to set the angle of the blur trace direction. I find it a little hard to use. This estimation region is enabled, so I'm just going to uncheck it just so the only data that it's gathering is from this image here. I'm going to click on preview, or you can press P so we can see what that does. So as you can see, you can click and drag to see the trace direction. You can also click and drag closer to the other point to change the trace length. And as you can see, this is a little bit harder to use in the auto feature. So I wouldn't recommend using it just because it's really difficult to use. But you can create a great effect with this tool. Maybe you're going for some weird effect with your image. Maybe it'll be useful for that. But as far as reducing the camera shake, I really wouldn't recommend it unless you really know the angle and the length of your shake, which most people don't, and I don't see why you would. So I wouldn't use it, but feel free to use it if you like. So I'm just going to use the regular auto motion detection. So I'm just going to delete this estimation region. I'm just going to cancel that since I didn't really make any changes. And that's a new shake reduction filter in Photoshop CC. One of the most exciting features in Adobe Photoshop CC is the ability to use Camera Raw as a filter. Camera Raw is a powerful image processing engine that is very popular among photographers. Camera Raw provides photographic controls like temperature, highlights, shadows, and clarity. In Photoshop CC, you can use Camera Raw as a filter with any layer, including video. So let me show you how that works. I've opened up this image of some buildings in downtown Oakland, California. I'm going to right click on the layer, select Convert to Smart Object, because I always like working non-destructively, and I suggest you do the same. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Camera Raw Filter. This is going to open up the Camera Raw filter, and if you've used Camera Raw before, this is going to look familiar. It looks pretty much identical. And as I've mentioned before, you can control the temperature of an image, so we can make it hotter, cooler, control the tint. You can do different photographic controls. I'm just going to hold Alt and click on Reset to just reset the image to the original settings here. And I'm going to show you one of my favorite features in Camera Raw, which is the lens correction, and specifically speaking, the upright filter. So when you open up lens correction, make sure that you're in the manual tab. When you open up, yours might have been set to color. Click on manual. Then you can click on any of these presets to apply different perspective balances to the image here. So for example, you can apply a level balance, which sort of straightens the image. You can do this balance here, which is a vertical perspective correction, and this one here, which is a vertical, horizontal, and level correction. But I find that the auto balance perspective correction works best in most cases. So click on auto. I'm going to press P on the keyboard, and that's the keyboard shortcut to enable and disable the preview checkbox there. So if I press P, this is before, and this is after. So as you can see, the image looks much better. It's much straighter than the original image. If you want to get further control, you can click and drag on these handles here and try to straighten the image a bit further. So maybe I want to make this line straighter. I can click and drag the controls here to straighten that line as much as possible. You could also rotate the image and scale it. So maybe I can bring that in so we don't have any blank areas here at the bottom, like so. So I'm going to click on the preview checkbox this time, and you can see the before, and you can see the after. So as you can see, the filter works really well. We're going to be talking about the Radial Filter in Adobe Camera Raw, and we're going to be using this image here. This is my wife, Michelle, and I took this picture of her in San Francisco, right outside of a restaurant called Cliff House. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to right click on the layer, convert it to a smart object, go to filter, click on Camera Raw Filter, and we're going to be using this new tool here, which is a Radial Filter. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I can click and drag and make an ellipse like so, and this tool always draws from the center, so keep that in mind. So I want to select her, and I can move it around like so. And by the way, just as a side note, if you click on this red dot in the middle, it'll just make an ellipse around the entire image. But anyway, so I'm gonna bring that back, select her, maybe something like this, and if you scroll down, you'll see that the effect can either go outside the image or inside the image. And you can tell which way it's affecting the tool by looking at the line here. If you see the red dashed line, the effects are going to be applied inside the image. If you see a green dashed line, the effects are going to be applied outside the image. So we want to apply the effects inside the image for this tutorial. Now these are the settings that were in the last gradient filter that I used. So Camera Raw remembers your previous settings, so I want different settings for this particular image. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the exposure to brighten her up. So essentially what I want to do is I want to brighten the sun behind her, and I can maybe add a little bit of contrast and maybe reduce the highlights just a little bit so it's not overblown, maybe somewhere around here. And I'll leave the other settings as they are. They're not really that important. I just want to show you how this tool works. So once I do that, I can press OK, and you can see the enhancement that it made behind her. So I can turn that off and turn it back on. So I can do a before and after, so you can see the difference. And it only affects this side to the left. And since we're using a smart filter and Camera Raw, the changes are non-destructive. So I can double click on the name, come back, click on the radial filter, and I can click on this dot here to bring that back. Another thing we can do with this is create vignettes. So I can double click on the dot here to make the ellipse go around the entire image. This time I want the effects to be applied to the outside of the image, and I'm going to decrease the exposure to darken up the outside, creating this vignette effect. I can play around with some of the settings to create this vignette. Obviously it's not going to look so good because I have the bright sun in the top left, but that's okay. And you create this vignette effect using Camera Raw. In Photoshop CC, Camera Raw's retouching tools have been improved as well. So let me show you how they work. I have this image here of the Golden Gate, and I'm just going to right click on this layer and convert it into a smart object, and then I'm going to go into Filter, Camera Raw. This time we're going to select the spot removal tool. You can click on this icon here or press B on your keyboard, and you can get this tool here, and you can see the circle there. This is my brush. I can click anywhere on this image and Photoshop will find a source to clone from or copy from to remove what I've clicked on. In that case, that red ball there that was distracting in this image. If you press V on your keyboard, you can hide the tools so you can see the results. If you press P on your keyboard, you'll see the before. Press P again to see the after. I'm going to press V once again to bring those tools back. Now you're probably thinking, well, why would you do that in Camera Raw? You could probably use a couple layers in Photoshop and use the healing brush tool or the clone stamp tool or something like that to get rid of that image. And you're right, you could do that in Photoshop. But the advantage of using Camera Raw is that Camera Raw works non-destructively. So any changes that you make in Camera Raw, they are not applied to the image. They're saved separately. So it's a more extreme way of working non-destructively. So now that you saw how you can just click on something and remove it, I'll show you the new feature in Photoshop CC. In Photoshop CC, you can actually click and drag to select something to delete, like so. And you can click and drag to find a better area if you like. So maybe I can just bring that down just a little bit and select that area, and I think that looks good. I'm going to press V on the keyboard, and yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. You can also increase or decrease the size of your brush by clicking on the bracket keys, just like you would do with any other brush in Photoshop, or you can click and drag the slider here. So I'm going to make this brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to click and drag on this area here. And we're just doing this to remove these distracting elements in the photo, just so the Golden Gate Bridge is the primary focus and not these elements. So I can click and drag this image again, maybe bring that down just so we can get some of that texture of the water to keep it the same. Everything is looking pretty good. If I press V on the keyboard once again, keep in mind since you're working non-destructively, you can click on these icons here and bring those back so you can maybe move them to a different area and sample from a different area. Or you can click on them and press delete, and it will get rid of that adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that one back, and maybe place it here to keep the same texture. I'll press V once again. When you're done, just press OK. And like always, you can use a filter mask to mask out some of the elements, so I can bring that back if I wanted to. Or you can double click on Camera Raw Filter and click on the spot removal tool, and these icons here represent the changes that you've made. So you can click on those and make any adjustments as you see fit. And those are some of the retouching improvements in Camera Raw and Photoshop CC. In this video, we're going to talk about the enhancements or the shapes properties panel in Photoshop CC. In this composition, we have 3 text layers, 4 shape layers, and a regular pixel layer. We're going to be working with the shape layers in this example, and make sure that you've selected the path selection tool by pressing A or clicking on the tools panel here. Then I'm going to click on this blue shape layer, and I'm going to open up the properties panel by clicking on this icon here. And if you don't see that, you can always go to Window and make sure that properties has a check next to it. From this properties panel, we can make some adjustments that we could not do before, like creating curve corners. So I can click and drag this corner here to the right and create a curve out of those corners. I can even make a perfect circle. You can also unlink the corner radius values, so you can adjust them separately. So I can click and drag and make one more curved than the other. Maybe I can do this one too, like so. And maybe this one will be just a sharp corner. Another enhancement in Photoshop CC is that you can increase the height of the shape layers without distorting it. So I can click and drag and make it taller. I can also make it wider. I'm going to press Ctrl-Alt-Z, Command-Option-C to undo those. If I wanted to apply these same values to the other shapes, I can simply copy these numbers here, select the other 2 shapes by clicking on them and holding Shift, and then paste those numbers here, and then pressing Enter. And as you can see, Photoshop goes ahead and gives the other shapes the same value as the original one. I'm going to go ahead and bring the properties back. And I'm going to go ahead and select all these shape layers. And I'm going to add a stroke to these so you can see how that works. I'm going to add this stroke here. And I can add strokes to multiple paths at the same time, as you see here. Another feature in Photoshop CC is when you're working with these path layers, it's sort of difficult to select the ones that you really want. Sometimes you have to come into the side here, and if you accidentally click on something else, then you have problems clicking on what you really want. So an advantage in Photoshop CC is that you can double click on any shape layer and it will solo it. It will isolate it so the other layers are hidden and you can't accidentally click on them or do anything else. See, I can just they're gone. I can't click on. If I click anywhere else, nothing happens. I can only click on that same layer. To bring the other layers back, you can simply click on this icon here and it will show you all the layers and you can select them. If you want to isolate another shape layer, simply double click on it and click on this icon to bring them back. Another enhancement in Photoshop CC is the ability to isolate layers, to solo them. And let me show you how that works. You might be working on a composition like this one here, which is my alien egg tutorial. And as you can see, there's a lot of layers here. But if I only wanted to work on one specific layer without all the other layers distracting me, I can simply select a particular layer, then go to the select menu and click on isolate layers. So now I only have this layer to work with and I don't have any of the other layers distracting me. If I want to go back and see the other layers, I can click on this icon here, just like you can with shape layers. I could also select multiple layers, like these here. I can click on this icon, and as you can see from the drop down, the selected option is what is selected. So you can just isolate the layers that you want to work with. And that's another nice little enhancement in Photoshop CC. Another new feature in Photoshop CC is the intelligent upsampling, which helps maintain detail when you enlarge an image. So let me show you how that works. I have this image here, which is part of a meal I had this year for my birthday, and I have a duplicate of that image. They're exactly the same. For this first image, I'm going to increase the image size using the features available in previous versions of Photoshop. So I'm going to go into Image, Image Size, and I'm going to change this to 200%. So it increases the image to 200% of its current size. For resample, bicubic smoother, which is what was available in previous versions of Photoshop. Then I'm going to press OK. So now the image is 200% its original size. I'm just going to change that to fit to screen so we see the entire image. I'll do the same for this image, but in this case I'll use the new intelligent upsampling. So I'm going to go into Image, Image Size, and for resample I'm going to choose Preserve Details, and I can change the noise reduction if I want to, or bring it or completely disable it. I'm just going to keep about 5%. And by the way, in this preview window you can zoom in and you can see what the changes do if you move the sliders around. And by the way, this changed back to 100%, which is why we can't see the changes. But if I zoom out a bit and make the changes here, you'll see what that does. There's a little bit of noise there. If I move it to the right, it smooths out the image, but you lose some detail. So you got to find a fine balance for that. And also, just as a side note, you can just go down the list and see which of these resample options are better for your image. But Photoshop has gone ahead and labeled which were best for what purposes. So enlargement, these two, reduction, smooth gradients, hard edges. So I'm going to click on Preserve Details, and reduce noise is fine at 6. A low number usually works okay. And then I'm going to press OK. This image now is also the same size as this image here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press V on my keyboard to select the Move tool. I'm going to click and drag it to the next tab, hold Shift so it places the image right in the center. So now both of the images are laying one on top of another and we can compare. So I'm going to zoom in I can show you the before and after. So this is before. This is the image without the new intelligent upsampling, and this is the image with it. So as you can see, it has a little more detail around the edges and highlights, and it doesn't look as blurry as the second image. It's not a huge difference, but it's significant enough that I thought it was worth mentioning. So next time you increase an image, you won't lose as much sharpness as you did in the past. There's also been some notable feature enhancements in 3D in Photoshop CC. One of my favorites is the live paint feature, and I'll show you how that works. I'm going to create a new mesh, and I'll do a new mesh for my preset, and we'll use the wine bottle as our preset. And Photoshop is going to auto-generate this wine bottle here, and I'm going to just click on the infinite light, and I'm just going to move the light just so I can get a better look of what's going on. Maybe I'll move the camera a bit too. Maybe this is a good spot here. Then I'm going to click on the wine bottle mesh. I'm going to click on the label material, and in the diffuse option I'm going to edit the texture. This is going to open up a new tab that shows the texture of that of that label. If I paint on the label with this blue color here and come back into my wine bottle, you'll see the changes here. This is how it worked in Photoshop CS6, but in CC I can go into Window, Arrange, 2 up vertical, and I can see a live paint preview. So anything I paint on the mesh, I can automatically see in the bottle. I could also paint in the bottle and see the same preview on the mesh. If I click on the Move tool, rotate my bottle, I can select the brush tool again. I can keep painting and seeing the result. You don't see the result because it painted here, but if I zoom out and continue painting, you'll see the live paint preview. So it works both ways. You can paint on the bottle and see the changes in the mesh, or you can paint on the mesh and see the changes on the bottle. This is a really awesome feature if you like working with 3D in Photoshop. Another enhancement in Photoshop 3D is the unlit feature. This gives an object the ability to ignore properties that could be distracting to you, such as bump maps, lights, and things of that nature. I'll show you how that works. I'm going to click on the Move tool, and I'm going to click on Scene, and in Surface, my style is going to be Unlit Texture. So as you can see, now my object and actually I'll close this so you can see that better, and I won't save it. So as you can see, my object is disregarding any of the lighting properties. If it had a bump map or any other texture map applied to it, it would disregard it. This is not a huge improvement, but it can be helpful when working in 3D. And that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed watching the new features in Adobe Photoshop CC. Let me know what you think about Adobe Photoshop CC in the comments down below. If you have any questions, you can leave them below as well, or you can head over to my Facebook, Twitter, or Google Plus page and leave them there if you like. If you like this video, don't forget to click on the like button and share it with your friends. And of course, don't forget to head over to my website, photoshoptrainingchannel.com, where you can subscribe to my newsletter on the right hand side, where I will send you an email every time I put up a new tutorial. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys next time.